Now, to look further at that speech, as well as other issues related to North Korea, we have with us Dr. Bong Young-shik from the Yonsei Institute for North Korean Studies. It's great to have you with us here again.
Pleased to be here again.
So last year, Yong-ho, the North Korean foreign minister, described Trump as a mentally deranged person and threatened to continue building North Korea's nuclear weapons. This time, he didn't even mention Trump, and he's promised the North's sincerity in its plans to denuclearize. It's quite a startling change of tone. What's your thoughts on Ri's speech this year?
Well, I mean, it depends on what kind of expectation you apply to his message. Some people would say that it's definitely toned down compared to the speech by the same person delivered last year, in which a U.S. president was called mentally deranged. And when the United States deployed the B-1B bomber deep, very close to the territorial airspace of North Korea, then outside the United Nations building, for Mr. Lee Yong-ho threatened that whatever Trump might think, he is going to see something bigger than that. And in response to the speech by U.S. President Donald Trump last year that the little rocket man is on suicide mission, and if things go in a wrong direction, then North Korea is inevitably completely destroyed. So not seeing that war of wars at this time may be regarded as a positive sign. But at the same time, the fact that in Minister Lee Yong-ho's speech, there is no concrete indications that North Korea is going to take concrete steps toward denuclearization or any new promises about dismantling its nuclear facilities or missile parts. That might be considered a disappointing aspect of his speech.
So, but if you look at Ri's speech, I mean, he hasn't shown any concrete steps towards denuclearization, but he argues that it's the US that needs to take steps now, to take action to show its countermeasures after the North Korea has shown other measures, such as shutting down like certain missile test sites and things like that. I mean, but do you think the US has to respond in some way to this now? Or actually, I mean, the question is, who holds the cards here, really? Because the US is making demands and North Korea is making demands here in this speech.
Regardless of which side is right with its argument, I think the United States is holding the trump card because in an analogy of a poker game, United States has far more chips. So United States can win the waiting game vis-a-vis North Korea, because what North Korea is insisting is that you have to take concrete actions in order to verify we can trust you. Lee Yong-ho used the same word, trust, 18 times in his speech, which lasted 15 minutes. So he emphasized trust in the absence of any action that verifies the reason that North Korea can trust the United States as a current adversary. Then North Korea will not unilaterally disarm herself with its nuclear weapons and missiles. But United States responds that without concrete actions by North Korea, United States cannot trust North Korea. So United States will not unilaterally lift economic sanctions on North Korea. So both sides are basically demanding the same thing to each other. Then in that stalled negotiation, then the United States is better suited to give time for this stalemate, because North Korea is bleeding under very tough and harsh economic sanctions, and it is very clearly indicated in Foreign Minister Lee Yong-ho's speech that North Korea wants to have the entire world believe that economic sanctions must be lifted as long as North Korea is not going to take another provocations or conduct another missile or nuclear test. But we all know that the very reason why economic sanctions have been in place is because North Korea has conducted nuclear tests and missile tests. So maintaining status quo cannot be regarded by the international community as sufficient reasons for it to lift economic sanctions on North Korea.
Sure, but I mean, if you look at Ri's speech, he says, we haven't been testing nuclear missiles, we haven't been testing nuclear bombs. Why are we keeping the international sanctions on us? they're saying, isn't it time that we reconsider this? But do you think there's any leeway that the UN, would reconsider having these sanctions on them, or maybe finding some wiggle room to ease it a little bit either?
No, I don't think that's the United Nations Security Council would work. As I said, that the main purpose of those economic sanctions authorized by a series of United Nations Security Council resolutions is to turn the clock back, not to maintain status quo. Clock back to the time that North Korea was without those missiles and nuclear weapons that threaten so many countries, including the United States, across the Pacific Ocean. So if North Korea wants those United Nations Security Council resolutions to be removed, then North Korea has to go back to the conditions in which it did not have those ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, that are allegedly able to top nuclear warheads and hit any part of the United States.
So North Korea, in his speech, Ri Yong-ho also attacked the UN command that's stationed in South Korea as well. He said they're meant to be an allied forces unit, but they're actually just being led by the US, and it's just a US force. That's pretty much, if I just sum up what he said. Do you think, Ri has a point? I mean, can we consider it that way as well?
Minister Ri has a point as far as it is correct that the United Nations Command is led by the chief, who happens to be the commander of the U.S. forces in South Korea. But that is a fulfillment of the United Nations mandate. So it was kind of weird that he made this point in the United Nations, which actually authorized the U.S. forces in South Korea command to assume that position to lead the United Nations command, in accordance with the United Nations Security Council Resolution 84, which was passed after North Korea's invasion of South Korea in June 2050. So on the surface, yes, it is true that the military head of the U.S. forces in South Korea is assuming the top position of the United Nations Command, but there's a lot more important, legal and political, as well as security considerations behind this phenomenon.
Yes, Ri did seem to have mixed messages towards the UN during his speech. On one side, saying, you should help us, on the other side, blaming them for some of the issues that they're having. So he had some issues there. But
I think the main purpose of he addressing this point is to try to drive the wedge between the United States and South Korea, because there's a little bit of the difference in opinions between the United States and South Korea about the agreements South Korean government made with the Kim Jong-un regime of North Korea in the Pyongyang Declaration about these confidence-building measures and arms reduction measures between the two Koreas.
So Ri, in this speech, he might have toned down his rhetoric compared to last year, but still, he was still making demands of the US. On the other hand, Donald Trump hasn't given any official response, but he did say in a rally this week that, after received letter from Kim Jong-un, that they both fell in love. That's what he said. What do we make of this response? Does the US have a response to Ri's comments or not?
Well, we have to wait and see the outcome of the next visit by U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to Pyongyang, and potentially another meeting between North Korea and the United States in Vienna. Whether the United States will be successful in persuading the North Korean regime to make additional steps toward the denuclearization, then what President Trump said, that they were in love. And it was a right decision to put trust in Kim Jong-un regime for its commitment to denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula was a right decision, will be proven the correct one. But if those meetings will not result in the positive outcomes, if North Korean leadership continue to resist making additional steps toward the denuclearization, while insisting that it is the turn of the United States to take proactive actions in response to North Korea's action, then I cannot rule out that the Trump administration may overnight change its attitude 180 degrees in favor of the maximum pressure, including expressed in harsh rhetorics like a lot of words from the Bible, like limestone, fire and fury, and whatnot.
Right, let me move on to something else today as well. So today, South Korea celebrates its Armed Forces Day, the 70th anniversary, in fact. And before we would have had like big military parades as well to show off its military hardware. But today it seems a little different tone. For example, this morning, that there was the remains of 64 South Korean soldiers who were killed in the Korean War that were identified in the US are now coming back to South Korea today. I mean, these bodies were found in North Korea and sent from North Korea to the US, and that's how it was discovered. I mean, what significance does this have? I mean, do you think this kind of thing puts pressure again on the situation that South and North Korea are still, you know, on the opposite sides of this conflict, which is officially still ongoing?
Well, this is a very good sign from many different angles. It is such heartwarming, development that the fallen soldiers finally return home after they made utmost sacrifice with their precious lives during the war. They could, rest in peace. And this shows a very good intention and a good positive spirit of the United States as a security partner of South Korea, that the United States, having received those remains of the unidentified fallen soldiers sent from North Korea for the past 10 years or even longer, and identify them and return them to South Korea, that shows how strong and cooperative both allies are, despite some minor differences in opinion about the management of the alliance and it's a collective dealing with North Korea's threat.
Yes, it was very emotional, I'm sure, for many as well in South Korea. One other development, South Korea and North Korea have begun removing landmines from the shared border area, from the DMZ and the Joint Security Area. It's the first step towards carrying out the military agreement that the two Koreas signed during the last summit in North Korea. How significant a step is this?
Well, this is a very significant and positive step, because South Korea and North Korea should not remain idle if there's a negotiation stalled between the United States and North Korea about denuclearization of North Korea. You have to do what you have to do in order to improve the security conditions on the Korean Peninsula. And this is a very good first step for South Korea and its allies to probe the true intentions of North Korean leadership about reducing the tension on the Korean Peninsula, including its future decisions with regard to its WMDs, including nuclear weapons and intercontinental ballistic missiles. So this is a very good, I would say, the litmus test to gauge the willingness of North Korean leadership to make so-called right choices.
I mean, but there's so many landmines in this border area. They say it's the most landmined area in the world, they say. Do you think it's possible to get rid of all these landmines?
Well, they're just saying that going 1,000 miles begins with the first step, right? One step. So you have to begin where you can. But I'm a little bit concerned about its long-term consequences. For instance, what if there is a massive defections occurred from North Korea when DMZ, demilitarized zone, will become safe to travel? Then it will have a very, explosive repercussions, politically speaking, to the leadership stability in Pyongyang, and receiving North Korean people in massive scale to South in a short period of time will be a big challenge to South Korean government in its public as well. So I'm all for reducing tension and making demilitarized zone demilitarized, literally, but at the same time you have to consider it's a long-term and potentially unexpected consequences on inter-Korean relations and domestic politics.
Right, so that's where we'll end it. Thank you for coming in today and sharing your insights as always.
You're welcome.